Hi students, welcome to the MOOC on statistical methods for psychological research. My topic for this today is on null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. What is this hypothesis? In our day to day life, decision making is one of the most essential part where everyone come across. Most of the times this decision making based on common sense. So, common sense once we considered as an art, now it has emerged as science, technology and engineering. So, if you see that the decision making with statistical methodology is a scientific background in which today we are going to cover the types of decision making. There are two possible correct decisions and two possible wrong decisions. The possible correct decisions is you may accept fact and also rejecting the false. However, accepting the false and rejecting the truth are the errors. So, in part 1 we are considering the types of errors, power, confidence coefficients, levels of significance, etc. So, the learning objectives of this course is that after listening me, you are able to make use of that how the statistical hypothesis is so significant in testing of hypotheses. There are two major hypotheses, namely null and alternative hypothesis. As the name itself indicates the meaning, you will be come across the more on this, and by the time of completion of this course you will be able to understand what is the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, how they can be make use and how they are significant in decision making. So, you will be given enough learning exposure through numerical examples and some sort of illustrations how a usual decision making is going on. Now, if you see that the total sample space is a combination or an union of two regions called accepting region and rejecting region. If you say that sample space is the union, then there are two regions which are mostly influencing. If you see that there is two regions which are in white color and blue colored, white color indicating accepting region, whereas the blue color indicating the critical region is also referred as rejection region. When you say that there are two types of corrects, as I mentioned, the corrects are, we call it as accepting the truth and rejecting the false. So, if you see that there are two types of errors also. What are that? Accepting the false and rejecting the truth are the types of errors. Now, what is power? Power is nothing but rejecting the false. What is the confidence? Accepting the truth. So, in our day to day life we have these type of situations. Accepting the truth, it is confidence. Rejecting the false, it is a power, and accepting the false is an error and rejecting the truth is also an error. Coming to these regions may exist of two types of things. You consider what is the sample space. Coming to the sample space, when an experiment is conducted with an example of die throwing, you will have all possible outcomes. The possible outcomes are, there are 6 possible outcomes, whereas if you toss a coin you will get the possible outcomes are 4, that are namely head and head, head and tail, tail and head, tail and tail. Coming to the acceptance and critical regions, the critical regions is a region which has rejection, accepting region is a region of acceptance. What it means? The meaning is, when a sample point falls in a region that leads to acceptance of the null hypothesis, then you call it as acceptance region. When a sample point falls in a region where it leads to rejecting the null hypothesis, then you call it as rejection region or critical region. So, sample space is a combination of both. If you see this, there you can have the phenomena that the critical region is in both sides. For instance, there is the minimum age and maximum age for getting a job. If you see that you are less than 18 years, you cannot be considered for any employment. If you are above 65 years, you cannot be considered for any employment. There you means the sample age, if it falls less than 19, 18 or more than 65, that comes under critical region. So, there you will have the critical region is both sides. Okay. Now, what do we mean by one sided critical region? The critical region, say for instance, I am not getting my eligibility of voting in election up to 18 years. So, after 18 years only I will be considered in the region of acceptance. Up to 18 years you cannot be considered. In this sense, your critical region is left side. So, it is also called as left tailed or lower tailed critical region. Coming to the right side, one side is right side. For example, your retirement age is 65, after 65 you cannot be considered. In this case, the critical region is on the right side of the sample space. Coming to the types of corrects and types of errors, already I have mentioned that there are two corrects. One is rejecting the null hypothesis when it is false is correct one, and accepting the null hypothesis when it is true is called correct 2. So, there are two categories of corrects and there are two categories of errors, in which type 1 error speaks about rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. However, type 2 error speaks about accepting the null hypothesis when it is false. So, these types of errors we call it as for decision making there is every possibility. Now, what is that? Probability of corrects or errors, if you say that null hypothesis, the possibilities are true and false, and decision making may be acceptance or rejection. Then we have four possible outcomes. One is probability of true hypothesis to be accepted, that is also known as confidence coefficient, which is denoted with 1 minus alpha. Probability of type 1 error, which means that null hypothesis is rejected though it is true. It is also known as level of significance and denoted by alpha. Now, coming to the second option, the null hypothesis is false, but if you are accepting, you call it as probability of type 2 error. Mostly it is denoted with beta, and complementary probability of the beta we call it as power of the test. So, these four options in terms of probability, if you accept, then it can be considered. So, probability of type 1 error or level of significance is alpha. For example, in a practical chance, the chance of leaving accused when he or she committed crime, assume that a judgment is being made, the error you can call it as chance of leaving accused when he is committed crime. Coming to probability of type 2 error, the example is chance of punishing the accused when he is innocent. And coming to the correct decisions are the chance of punishing the accused when he is culprit and the chance of leaving the accused when he is innocent. So, therefore, we have these four options while making any decision. This can be observed in any practical situation. There you are handling these four complementary concepts. So, friends, so far we discussed what are the all possible types of decision making. The decision making is not that easy when we are making or when we are practically involved. So, there is a possibility of committing errors that are called type 1 and type 2 errors. There is a possibility of getting the correct decisions that are called confidence and power. as a summary, I can say that this part 1 we covered while making this null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis for making use of decision. These are the 4 complementary options where we have to deal with in any practical situations. This is what I intended to explain you in part 1 of this module.